That's right, we're here in Cape Canaveral, Florida, my home state, at the Kennedy Space Center, where we were welcomed for an immersive tour. Behind me is the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building, where the Guinness World Record largest American flag stands behind me. The stars are 6 feet tall, so obviously they're taller than me.
Here's another type of truck they have over at NASA. This one moves the core stage, and as you can see, it has that big crescent up at the front where you lay the core stage sideways and you drive it along this. How many of these do you use for the core stage? They're not even sure. More than you can count. I'm not sure. There's at least 2 right here. I hope everyone's enjoying SpaceWaves. We came down to NASA Kennedy Space Center to check out the coolest truck that they have on the lot over here. It is the CT NASA crawler. This is the second one, and we're gonna learn all about it right now on SpaceWaves. Take a look at this. We're lucky this isn't on. They were just telling me there's an earplug box up there, and this thing is over 100 decibels. If you are in the cab driving it, you have to wear double protection, and as you can see here, there's actually 2 cabs. Maybe there's even more. There's one here. This is CT. There's also CT1. This thing is so big, I thought it was like both crawlers at first. We're gonna keep going. This walk around may take a little while. You hear those stones under my feet, by the way? These are specially imported from the Mississippi River because they're hard enough, and if you look at these treads, if they weren't the right type of stone, they would grind up and there would be dust everywhere. By the way, this vehicle takes diesel 37 feet per gallon. Keep going. It just goes on and on. By the way, John Conrad, if you're listening, look at the paint on this. Do you see rust on here? This thing's 60 years old. You think the Navy could take a few lessons from this team? You see that, by the way? That's the VAB right over there. It's like right around a turn. Maybe I'll show you the road better. But it takes like 5 hours just to get there because this thing only goes 1 mile an hour. And as you can imagine, the turns, like, they have to be specially planned. That walkway right there, see the hoist? That lifts it up so when they drive, you pull the walkway away. 60 years old. They say they're gonna run it for another 20. Here's the other cab up there. Diesel-powered freaking feast. Here's the front of her. And now, this is the road. And look, that's how close the VAB is, but it takes 5 hours just to go like that way and take a big old right. And then I think you gotta take another right. And then from there to the launch pad, they said it takes 9 hours. All right, good morning. We are at Kennedy Space Center with my good friend,
Bob Myers.
Bob Myers. Thank you for having me out here today. You probably have one of the most unique jobs at this entire facility of 10,000 people.
I agree. It's very fortunate. The place I work here is one of the few places where you actually get to operate what you work on every day.
Now, a lot of the guys I talk to, they'll drive like a Freightliner or a Cascadia or a Mack truck, but you drive the crawler. Tell me a little bit about driving this thing to work.
Driving this to work, we'll say it doesn't drive too far. I mean, its only capability is driving on top of a roadbed. So, but driving it is probably one of the greatest jobs you could have. It's a real honor to be able to carry, the nation's space program on your back.
Now, Bob, I gotta ask you, were you a truck driver beforehand? Do you have a CDL? How does one end up there in the cab of a vehicle like this?
It's very good. You have to be an engineer to start with, and then you go through a on-the-job training program where you actually take a written test, and then beyond that, you sit in the cab with a trained, certified person for anywhere from 6 months almost up to a year before you gain the capability of operating on your own.
Now, this thing just celebrated its 60th birthday, the crawler's 60th birthday. How long have you been driving it for then?
I've been driving it probably pretty much 40 years.
Noticing the big exhaust too. What does this run on? Diesel? A lot of diesel?
It does run on a lot of diesel. Actually, there are two 2,750 horsepower engines, Alco diesel engines, that in turn turn four 1,000 kilowatt DC generators that provide power for these 16 400 horsepower GE motors. So it's quite a power plant.
Interesting. Now, when you're on a project, you're a lot of like truck drivers, for example, they pick up the trailer, they got to bring it to one warehouse or to a port to another location. Your route's a little different. We started over here on this Mississippi stone, and you got to crawl across this stone over to the VAB, which we'll be checking out later, the Vehicle Assembly Building. How long does that route take?
Well, from here, just from this point to the VAB, you're looking at probably about 3 to 4 hours.
Wow.
Okay, by the time you get underneath, because that's the basic move of the crawler, is to make itself go low enough so it can go underneath the mobile launcher, then raise itself up, pick that launcher up, take it to its destination point, set it back down, and then back away. And that's the basic operation that the crawler is. Now you talk about time-wise, actually it's 3 or 4 hours to the VAB, but from the VAB to the pad, we're looking pretty close to 9 hours.
Wow. For those who aren't standing there right now, the VAB is right on the other side of us in this camera shot. This road that we're on, it goes straight here, it goes across that gate, and then you gotta turn over there?
Yeah, you actually make a couple of what we call max angle turns. In other words, the max angle that the crawler is able to handle itself on. We make a few max angle turns, then back up and then get straight across from the doors of the VAB, and then propel ourselves inside and underneath.
What's the turning radius on something this massive?
Minimum turning radius for this crawler is 500 feet.
500 feet. So you really got to prepare. You got to know where you're going.
That's what it's all anticipation. That's right. We're driving the crawler because at the speed is slow, and of course the track is large. So and able to take the tight turns and all the other obstacles you got to go by, it does take a lot of anticipation.
What are you moving on? 1 mile an hour?
1 mile an hour and 100. We usually don't over a mile an hour because of load capabilities, but we usually try to stay about a mile an hour, just under a mile.
Can you tell it's moving though?
You can tell it's moving. I mean, when you walk up the stairs, obviously a mile an hour. I mean, most people can walk between 2 and 3 miles an hour, so it's a lot. It's fast. The size is what makes it seem fast. Something this massive, moving down the crawler way. And I'm telling you, if you were driving it at a mile an hour, it seems like you're driving at 10 or 20 miles an hour.
What's the biggest load you've had on top of this?
The absolute biggest load we've had on top of this is a test load that we're looking for some of the future missions. And that's including the crawler itself. We're talking about somewhere between 24, 25 million pounds.
24, 20. And what's that? It's the power weight, nothing on it. How much is it?
Just by itself, it's 6.8.
6.8 million.
6.8 million pounds.
Massive. And this has to get like negative miles per gallon, right?
It actually gets, it's kind of funny. It actually gets 32 feet per gallon.
32 feet per gallon. What's the controls like out there? What's it up in the cab?
The controls actually are pretty simplistic. Most of them are electronic. That's all drive-by-wire. Yeah, obviously. And
It's arbitrary.
right, everything will tactile computer. This sits in the control room, and then it translates those inputs and sends them out to the pumps, which of course move the big hydraulic cylinder that move the crawler back and forth on the thaw.
Now you only have 2 of these, right?
Only had 2 of these. We have this is crawler 2. This is what we call, I guess you'd say, the newer one.
Yeah.
And then we have crawler 1, which sits in the other yard across.
Now, you've got 2 of these. One of the drivers has been doing this for 40 years. If our listeners, especially younger ones, aspire to one day drive this kind of beast, what would you recommend to them?
Well, obviously to try and take a lot of math and science, and work towards an engineering degree. And they also have a lot, NASA, has a program where they can bring people in the summer, interns, and you can kind of get an idea of what you're working on. And you can make your application out to the company, and hopefully they accept.
Did you ever break down on here?
Very few. Very few times, and it's just it's something that we can usually repair right away. But I'm gonna just to let you know, the crawler has a lot of backup systems.
Yeah.
So because you don't want to get stuck on the crawlerway, there's nobody coming to tow you.
Now this thing is 60 years old. Probably some lost art and sort of ancient technology on here. How do you make sure it's maintained?
We actually do a lot of maintenance on it to make sure everything stays up. Once again, like I said, the maintenance is pretty easy. You're talking about a machine that was built in the 60s. More of the complicated, what we'll call systems on the crawler, are all electronic, which previously they were mostly basically electric, but they've moved into high-end electronics.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. You're doing the Lord's work out here. You got one of the coolest jobs. It's a beautiful day, and I know you have to get back to work. So thank you for taking a little time with us to talk about the crawler.
No problem. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, we're up on the crawler now, and I got my good friend John Giles here. Good to see you. Great to see you. We interviewed on my show about 4 years ago, and I got to learn all about this, and made me so excited to come out here. And I got to tell you, the B-roll does not do this thing justice. It is absolutely massive in person.
Yeah, the first times everyone comes here, that's the first thing they say, wow, it's so much bigger in person. Okay.
How does someone get tasked with running sort of the Jawa sand crawler operations at NASA?
I just lucked into it. I was doing another job, and one time my manta came to me and said, do you want to be the deputy for the crawler? And I said, sure. But thinking vocally, well, maybe I don't could do much work. Maybe the main person will have to do all the work, and I can just learn. And it wasn't very long after that, the person who had this job got promoted, and it's like, okay, you're the head of the crawler now. I'm like, okay. And then since then, it's the best job I've ever had. I'd really enjoyed this.
What is like an operation day look like there? So,
Very early, yeah. You get here about 4 hours before we roll. You start to get everything prepared. You get all your stuff that you need on board. You get the engines up and running. You get doors open wherever we're going to, and then we start rolling. Say we're rolling to the pad. That's another 8 hours. When we're done there, we have a lot of cool down work to do. So a day could easily be 12, 14, 16 hours.
what is the we're looking up here, and your great driver told me all about this. He told me about the massive payload this can take, but how does this get rigged up here? So is there another system that drops the...
So every corner, just like right over the top of your head there, is a flat spot. And there's one above each corner. There's one right over there. At those spots, those 4 locations, is where an MLP or a mobile launcher just sits right on top of them. This 4 spot, that's it. Just sits right on top of us. We clamp down to it, and that's the only connection we have to it.
Interesting. Now, so shipping containers, they fall off trucks sometimes. Do you ever have an issue with something toppling on here?
No. And we have a very sophisticated leveling system.
Yeah.
So leveling is constant, real time, always leveling us. And if we get out of level by more than 2 inches for more than a few seconds, it just shuts us down. And it's basically telling us, go back there and manually level yourself out, and then you keep going. So we've never had an issue.
Now, these massive threats, they have to chew up everything they go across. And you guys were telling me before we went on camera, the stones are an interesting element to make this whole thing work. What's unique about the stones?
So originally when this was built back in the mid-1960s, and it drove down a road, and when it first turned, it just shredded the pavement. So they had to come up with something better. So they looked at all different kinds of rocks from all around the world and settled on a type of river rock that we have here in this country. Typically comes from Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, like that. And we actually have a specification that they have to meet. We go out, we send them this specification, which means they have to take this rock, put it in a tumbler with steel, and tumble it for so many days, and then so much percentage of the rock has to be left over to make sure it's tough. Has to be river rock, so it has round edges, so it's much smoother. It's kind of like little ball bearings when we want to turn on it now, so it makes it really smooth for us. And then as we crush it, it absorbs the energy and all the weight, so it gives the launch vehicle a very smooth ride.
Now, this thing is 60 years old. Happy birthday, Crawler. Just celebrate it. But you're the most advanced organization in the world, NASA. Is this something that can be futurized, iterated upon, or is this like the apex design?
So I'm sure we could come up with a better design, but we don't need to. This has worked so perfectly for 60 years, and we don't really need sophistication. I tell people your cell phone probably has more computer processing power in it than what we use on this, because we don't need it. We like things simple. We don't want to get out there to something complicated and electronic, and then at one point we get the blue screen of death and we have to reset everything. So we keep it simple.
I gotta say, too, you do a nice job of keeping paint on here. You see a lot of Navy ships very rusty by the ocean. You're by the ocean. You keep your big rig looking beautiful. How much maintenance do you have to do to just keep this looking good? And can this thing basically run forever as long as you keep it running?
The plan is to run it for at least another 20 years. And I tell people it's kind of like the bridge out there in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, we start frozen control on one end, and by the time we get to the other end, it's time to go back to the other end and start all over again. So yes, we keep all of this as clean as possible and clean as possible. We actually have to do a lot of corrosion control inside these trucks. They're actually hollows. There's a lot of compartments in there, and occasionally they will get filled up with water because this has been its entire 60 years outdoors. So occasionally we do have to go in there, clean up the water, and then sandblast it and put a new coat on inside there.
What's your next mission?
Artemis 2. Artemis 2, yeah. We'll be taking Artemis 2 to head. That will be our next big role.
Prehistoric, big piece of history, awesome piece of machinery. Now, even want to be part of that history, if they wanted to join this team, work on something this cool, what would you recommend to?
Come and get a job at Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah.
And then when you're here, so I'm NASA, so I'm kind of like the crew chief for this. I manage this whole operation. And then we have a contractor, which is Amentum, and they do all of the driving and all the maintenance for us. So there's one or two different people you go work for.